SaaS Therapy.
Welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk, and today I am joined by a wonderful guest, Heather Wendt, who is a community strategist at HigherLogic. She specializes in customer success and community management, and her expertise in event and change management has been pivotal in developing strategies for Gain, Grow, Retain, which is, to my knowledge, the largest customer success network that's out there and community that's out there. She fosters a network of customer success professionals, and Heather has really honed her role and her skills in content development and education, making her an asset to that community that she serves. Heather, welcome to SaaS Therapy.
Todd, thank you so much for having me.
You know, normally when we start these podcasts, we always like to start with the most important questions first, which is the this or that game. So I've got three questions for you. I'm going to ask you this or that, which is the most important question. If you could choose between living in a treehouse or a houseboat, what would it be?
I think it'd have to be a houseboat.
Okay. That's good. So mostly because you want to be on the water or because forests are muggy and buggy?
I live in Colorado, so forests here are definitely not muggy or buggy. But I just think that in a treehouse, you're stuck where you're at. In a house on the water, you can go anywhere.
Hey, there you go. Already learning a lot. Okay. Would you rather be able to speak every language fluently or play every instrument in existence perfectly?
I think it would have to be the languages.
Because then you get on your houseboat, and when you go anywhere, then you can talk to anyone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it all ties together. Well, now that we know that you would be on this houseboat traveling the world, the most important thing is, would you rather be able to breathe underwater or have the agility of a cat?
Well, I already have the agility of a cat, so I'm going to have to go with breathe underwater.
Oh, it's so good. I love it. Well, Heather, thanks for entertaining me and hopefully our listeners as we get to know you a little bit better. I always am amazed as we play that game how I tend to learn something about people that I didn't expect I would learn, even in that process. So, Heather, your background is in community and helping customers really get more invested in their world. And from my perspective, it's been interesting to see in the last few years, community especially has become a really hot topic in the world of CS. And so I'd love to get your perspective as why is it that community is such kind of a buzzword in the CS world today?
Sure. Well, I think the main reason for that is the ability it gives teams, and especially customer success teams, to expand their reach to customers in a more organic way, in a more kind of transparent, authentic way. Websites, it's one directional. You're providing information, your customers are consuming it. Even social media tends to be more of an audience driven than a community driven process. And so to have a community where you can bring customers together, you can share information that reaches them much more effectively and a space for them to be able to talk to each other, to be able to converse with you. It starts to build a network rather than just a group of customers.
You know, you said something that caught my attention there that I'd love to get your take on. I don't think I've ever considered that this way, that there's a difference between aggregating an audience that you push content to and having a community. How would you define that idea, right? Of it's not just about getting a bunch of people to join a network, but like building a community, there's something different to that. So how would you define the difference between just having an audience of names and a list versus having a really good, healthy community?
Of course. So with an audience, typically, like you said, it's that one directional push. You're getting information out to them, and there's value there. There's definitely a place for, the social media audience driven things. But even email, right? It's a one-to-one. So I send you an email, you send me an email back. There may be some people on the thread, but that's where it lives and that's it. In a community, you have a chance to build relationships. You have a chance to partner your customers up with each other. And I don't know about you, but every software that I've worked for or worked with, the people who develop the software and are sharing most of the information out have their view of what that software does. And then you put it in the hands of your customers, and your customers do things with it that you may never have even thought of doing. And it lives there with that one person. By having a community, you give a space for people to share and collaborate with each other. You also provide a space for them to be able to possibly speak into your business practices. Maybe you have early adopters who are trying out a new feature, and they're giving you feedback on whether that feature is working and doing what you thought it was going to do, or whether it's not very helpful. And so you start to bring customers into a relationship with you rather than just consumers.
I love that. So it's a community, to your point is, if I go to a social media website, a lot of the times the vast majority of people who are on social media are just consuming content, not producing content and having conversations back and forth. And if they do, they're usually not healthy or productive conversations, I would guess either.
Very true.
But in a community, the difference between that is maybe you would gauge the health of a community based off of the percentage of users who are engaging, sharing ideas, asking questions versus just going there and consuming content.
You definitely have that piece of it. There's kind of a rule, and it's depending on who you talk to, it's the rule or a rule. 90-9-1. So 90% of your members are consumers. They're coming to absorb, to see what people are talking about, but they're not necessarily interacting or engaging. 10% might respond to things, right? They might comment or like things. And then you have your 1% who are truly producing things. They're starting conversations. And when you're measuring the health of a community, a lot of it is dependent on your goals. So what is a healthy community for one company may be very different than what's healthy for another. And so it's understanding what are the goals of the company? What do the customer behaviors look like in reaching those goals? And then what can you use in the community to measure those behaviors that reach those goals? And sometimes it is that engagement. Definitely you want people in there talking. Otherwise, you just have a website. So you want to have something more than that. But it's a whole vast array of things. So it could be how many people are downloading a particular content piece. How many questions that are being asked in the community are being answered by peers rather than by staff. So things like that can kind of tell you, again, based on what your goals are for the community, how the community is going to support your organizational goals. The metrics that you're going to track for health are definitely going to vary.
Makes a lot of sense to me. In other words, there's some indicators that you could use, maybe some KPIs that give you a sense of if your community is on the right track. But even if that community isn't achieving the goals, even if you have good engagement there, then that is a miss. In fact, I think you mentioned a couple of things that I thought were really interesting at the start when it comes to trying to determine kind of why you want to have a community and what the value is there. A successful community isn't just one that has high engagement per se.
Right.
A successful engagement or a successful community needs to actually be accomplishing a few things. You mentioned a couple of ideas that I really liked, which were like identifying new use cases, because now customers are sharing insights. It could be getting feedback on new features that have been deployed. So those are a couple of things that you mentioned. Are there from your perspective, what are some other things that would give you a gauge of like this community is driving to a really positive outcome for the business?
Sure. So I think, part of what a community does is it's there to meet the needs of your customers, right? That's the critical piece of it. But it also drives back insights and helps you to see customer behaviors in a way that you can't see normally. Your CSMs, your support teams, they're seeing customers in a very specific time frame, a time window. And outside of that, they may not really have a lot of engagement. A community, if you have people talking to each other, you're going to start to see, are there friction points that you weren't aware of? Are there aggravation pieces that are keeping your customers from doing what they need to do? And it's not bad enough for them to, put a ticket in or to call their CSM, but it's still annoying. And so you can start to, if you have customers talking in there and they're talking about the product, not just about their pets. It's great to have a pet channel. I, by the way, don't have one in GGR, but a place where people can share pictures of their cats and snakes and dolphins. I don't know.
I want a
Sorry,
pet
since I'm
dolphin.
on the
That sounds
houseboat. Since I'm on the houseboat, of course I have to have a pet dolphin.
Of course, yeah, why
Um,
not?
but you can drive a ton of engagement by having fun discussions like that, and that brings nothing of value back to the organization, right? Your customers are having fun, but they could go, they can go to Facebook for that. They could go to, Instagram or whatever. But a truly impactful community is one where you are empowering your customers to move into that self-service in between the directed service, I guess I would call that. You do not, as a employee, as a CSM or whatever role you play, there's no way that you are going to meet 100% of your customer needs. You can't. There's no time. Well, maybe if they were your only customer, you might be able to get close to that. And so what you're looking for is a community where people are logging in, right? They're coming to visit the community because there's value in the community. Maybe they're talking, or maybe they're just using the question and answer to ask a question about, hey, I'm trying to make this do X and I'm not succeeding. Can somebody help me? You can look at, is there a reduction? I know that every customer facing team gets those questions that they answer over and over again, the same questions. They, have a script or, that they maybe send out, or they just know what they're saying because they get it like 10 times a week or something. If you're moving that over to the community, how is that impacting, say, your support tickets? Are you seeing fewer of them because people are going to the community first?
Those are some really good concepts or ideas, right? So lowering support tickets, spending less time answering the same question over and over again, creating a space where customers feel like they can really build a relationship with you. Those are all really awesome. I think it's, from my perspective, one of the things that I always, this show's SaaS therapy. And I love the fact that you brought up the fact that sometimes there's the little annoying things that go unsaid that don't get resolved. And so I think sometimes there's a fear that I see from companies where they're like not sure if it's okay to like allow that dirty laundry to be out in the air, right? Because that can be damaging to their brand perception, right? Because maybe I'm more concerned about my perception of my brand than how I'm actually doing. What would you say to a company that is hesitant about allowing for that kind of honest and open conversation to happen with their customers?
Yeah, that's an easy question to answer. They are talking somewhere, and they're either talking in a space where you're going to be able to address the issue, because oftentimes, I mean, face it, we're human and not all of us are super strong tech. So how many of the issues that customers come to us and complain about are actually user issues? The product is fine. The user just doesn't know how to use it properly. If they're out there talking in the wild, if you will, then unless you have people monitoring all of those different channels, and there's a lot of them. I mean, Reddit, holy cow. I forgot what the latest count of Reddit channels is, but it's massive. There's no way
Mm-hmm.
to really monitor that very well. So if it's in the community, you have a couple of factors, and I've seen it from both sides. I've had the fear that, hey, if we do this, they're just going to turn this into a complaint space, and it's just going to be dogging on the product. What actually ends up happening is they get a chance to talk about some of the frustrations, and you as a company get to address them. So maybe it's, you realize, oh, we thought this was a minor deal, but obviously this is a very big deal. It's bothering a lot of customers. We need to prioritize this. At which point you can let them know, hey, we heard you. We have this on our product roadmap for, quarter 2. We're working to resolve this. The other piece that you're missing out on is within a community for a product, a customer community. Oftentimes, other community users come to your defense. And one of the things that I've learned is when I'm in a community manager space, I can post the most amazing content with a great discussion question, super well thought out. I get some feedback. If I were to give that same content to one of my members and say, hey, can I post this on your behalf? Like a seed question is what they call it in community. Tons of engagement. It's different when you're peer to peer. There is way more weight given to what your peers are saying. And so if you have different customers coming up and saying, hey, actually, I think that if you just toggle on this setting, you're going to see that this issue goes away. You're actually giving your customers the ability to come in and support your product in a way that you cannot do. There is something very different from you as the product coming in and saying, hey, here's the fix, and having a peer come in and say, hey, here's the fix. And like I said, they are going to talk. If they're not happy with your product, it's going to be out there. This way you get to see what they're doing and you get to do something to help it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good point. You want to make sure that you have a chance to address it. And the only way you're going to do that is if you know it's happening. The interesting thing for me is when I think about community, so many, there's a lot of organizations that kind of feel like the community is like the new silver bullet. And so what I see out there is a lot of times people are like, well, we got to go build a community, but they haven't thought through how they need to build a community and what they need to do to have it. So, standing up a page where people can submit questions or post comments, if your audience isn't engaged and they're not excited, like that's not a community. I think a lot of people conflate the idea of a website with a community brand on it as a community versus actually focusing on what makes a good community. So I'd be curious from your perspective, what do you think you need to do to make a good community?
Sure. So first, we talked about this already. You have to know where it fits. What's the purpose of it? What are you hoping to accomplish by it? So sometimes it's a product, a support community, and that's the entirety. You want it to be a place where customers can come and get help. Okay, and that's great. There could be, trying to think of all the different types. There's advocate communities where your whole role is to try to identify those people who are, super users. To me, what I tend to see is the best communities, at least the best communities I see, are a blend of a lot of focuses. It's not just one thing. So once you have kind of, hey, what's my primary goal? Now you can start looking at platforms, right? Is Slack going to do it for you? Slack is not a community platform, but it is a conversation platform. Can that work? If you're a smaller company, you don't have the budget for a full community. Can that stand in the gap? A lot of companies do that, and that's great. The goal, though, when you're looking at this is, one, buy-in from other teams. So when I started my community career, and I have to tell you, I had an association come to me and ask. I had never heard of the association. They came to me and asked if I would be their community manager. I had to Google search what a community manager was. I had no idea. That was not what I was doing at the time. But they saw some skill sets and things that I was doing that would tie over to that. When I came on, the first thing I did was get to know all of the teams that were in this association. And what I wanted to understand is what were their goals and what were their pain points for those goals. I wasn't coming in and saying, hey, community is here and it's going to rescue you, because that's not how it works. It isn't a silver bullet. It is a help, right? It's a tool that can do things that other tools cannot do. And so first I had to understand their needs. I also worked to understand the customer needs. So I had customer meetings and talked with them about what are your needs? Where are you feeling underserved? by this association? What are the, what would you like to see if we have a community? What were some of the top things that would make the community valuable to you? They had a community already in place, but when I came on board, they had signed contract with HigherLogic, and it was my job to build it out and launch it. So I started, I did all of that work while I was learning what community was and finding those best practices. Within 6 months of launch, we saw a 1900% engagement from our members. There was a survey done before I came on board, and there was a survey done just before I left. Community didn't even register as a benefit, because everybody who was part of an association was part of the community. They didn't even register as a benefit. When I left, it was almost tied for first with why they would renew with us, because the value that they got out of connecting with each other, out of being able to be supported more effectively by the different product teams that we had, was huge. So you have to have that. What's the purpose? And then what are the actual needs? The company can have a great goal, but if it doesn't align with the customer goals, then your community isn't going to be used. You're going to have this, beautiful shop, and nobody's going to come visit it. The other part is to understand that community takes time. I hear a lot of times, well, we have a community, but nobody's using it. Okay, well, what did you do to build it? It takes effort, and it takes time. So sometimes, people will throw a campaign out there, and I think in marketing, I'm not a marketer, but I think in marketing, sometimes you see results a little bit more quickly, right? So you do some A/B testing and you do some things like that, and you can identify what works and what doesn't a little bit faster. In community, you have to be sure to give it time, because it isn't just a quick, like, okay, I did this. Oh, nobody's talking. Okay, that was a fail. Throw it out, start something else. It's a little bit of a longer process. You have to be willing to give time to see whether it builds momentum, because it doesn't start out with everybody just jumping in and being like, oh, you have a community. Finally, now I can get in there and talk. So you have to have somebody who is in team. There's all kinds of conversations out there about what team should own community. And in my opinion, it doesn't really matter, as long as somebody from each team is working with whomever owns it. As long as you're looking at, what ways can we make this happen? What ways can, if this is a gap for us, if we just don't have enough people to reach out and talk, we know email isn't highly effective. It's the most effective thing we have, but it's, I think the latest I saw on the SaaS side was 39% open rates. So, you're not hitting your whole customer. So if that's your primary means of communicating, then you're missing the mark. So how can you as a CS team take a look at what information you're sharing out with everybody? And I know I'm kind of wandering a bit, sorry.
Okay.
But what information can you share out that all of your customers need to know, regardless of their persona, regardless of their maturity? Community is a great place to put that, because now as you're educating your customers that the community is the place to go to get a lot of their needs met, that's now off your plate, right? You post it there, and you don't have to send out 50 personalized emails. It goes into the community, and it's evergreen. You also don't have to rely on whether they kept your email or whether it got buried, because they're the type of customer that just lets their inbox be their full repository and they use search to try to find everything. That is not how I live. It gives me anxiety, as having a very full inbox. But there's people out there that do. If it's in an email, odds are it disappears. If it's in a community, they can find it. And so it's kind of identifying what content should go in there, because everything can't go in there, but what content moves the needle for the most people. So building out that content stream, working with whomever's managing and running the community to make sure that it has a space that's easy to find, easy to access. I think those are some of the big pieces, but it's always keeping in mind that this is not a quick fix. This is a long-term program.
Well, I would guess that that's good advice for most people who are listening, regardless of if they are a community manager or not. I think we sometimes will give up on best practices because we expect to see results so quickly.
Hmm.
We're you post even if you just looked at social media, right? You post a link to LinkedIn, and you got one person who liked it, and you didn't have any comments on it. You're like, why did I do this? But no, well, it takes time to build trust and to help a
Hmm.
customer to really see that you are invested in them and that they should be invested in you. And that can only be proven through consistency and, a long-term play rather than hoping for some instant gratification.
Exactly. And you have to prioritize it as a company. So it should be part of your onboarding process. That access to community, that knowledge of what your customers can expect to find in the community should be part of the onboarding. And it should be continuously driven to, right? So if you have a customer who comes to you and asks one of those frequently asked questions, you don't ignore them and you don't say, hey, go to the community and ask that. I don't have time. You answer it, but you provide the link to say, hey, here's the quick overview of it. But if you click this link, it'll take you to our customer community where you can read more detail. And so what you're doing, it's that education piece. It's helping people move away from maybe the CSM is the source of all knowledge. If I have a question, I'm going to reach out to my CSM. And it drives them to the community first. I know that Gartner did some research, and 67% of the customers that they polled on this survey said that they would much prefer self-service first. They would rather go and find the information themselves and not have to add a support ticket or make a phone call or send an email or jump on a chat. They'd rather go to the community space, and find their information that way. I know I do that. I will exhaust the internet before I will make a phone call.
Yeah, I feel like we've all been conditioned that way as people, and it's one of those things that I think so many CS leaders need to be thinking about. Of especially, and there's a lot of pressure on CS leaders to be a lot more efficient and a lot more effective. And if you've got a large book and you can't be on the phone with all of them every day, then you got to figure out how to do things in a more scalable approach, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think would be interesting to get your take on, if you were to figure out like how, what are, if you could give kind of the top 5 things, I guess, of what are the things that make a community impactful, what would you say people should be thinking about as far as building out a really good and effective community?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say first off, make it valuable. You want people to come back to it because what the information in it and the opportunities in it meet their needs. And that could be through your awareness driving, through your content, through the conversations that are in there, giving special spaces maybe for advocates or early adopters, access to things that the general customer population doesn't have, but make it valuable to them. The second thing would be make it easy. So if you have multiple, community isn't going to be your only tech stack, but use SSO so that your customers don't have to log into 6 sites. If you have an LMS, if you have a community, there's so many places. Make it easy so that one login and they can move throughout your different tech pieces. Federated search is something that I absolutely love. And what that means is you can come to the community, you can do a search, and if you've connected your tech stack that has other content pieces, it will pull it from there. So if you have a course on your LMS and somebody searches for that topic, that course will pop up, and it just raises awareness of all of the different content and all of the different ways of supporting your customers that you have without having to move everything to the community. The community should not be the home for everything, but by tying them together, you're allowing your customers not to have to think, wait, did I find that? Was that on this piece or was that over here? Or where in the world do I go to get this? Another piece is make it collaborative. So not just collaborative between you and your customers. That's vital, right? If I as a customer have the ability to come and ask other customers questions, oh, I love that. And if I have responses from people from the company to a question that maybe a fellow customer cannot answer, I just feel like I'm tied a little bit more closely. But make sure it's collaborative behind the scenes as well. So customer success is not an island, right? You have to work very closely with possibly your marketing team for, upsells. If you want to upsell a new release, then your customers have to understand why that new release matters to them. And marketing and product are going to help with that. Your support tickets, understanding, what customers are coming to support to get help and to express frustration or because they're stuck with something, because that gives you a better picture of where your customers are in their journey, what their health is, and you can start to work to, put out any fires that might be there. So collaboration is huge. And best of all, it's a great chance to spotlight your customers who are doing amazing things. User generated content is amazing. It's amazing because one, they get to be there in front of their peers as peer leaders. Everybody likes a little recognition. That's why LinkedIn and Facebook work. It also takes some of the load off of your content marketing team because the customers are helping you create some of this information. And so you start to make this a collaborative effort between you and your customers, between your customers and your customers, and it just becomes this huge network of support and help. Number 4 would be make it aligned. So what are the metrics? What are the goals? And make sure that your community is set up to drive the needle. Again, you can have a great community that talks about pets or travel or your favorite songs or artists, and that's great, but it doesn't help your company. It's not helping the organization grow. So make sure that you're aligning that and that you're working with whomever's running the community to get some metrics. How many people, hey, our team wrote this newsletter and we posted it in community. How many people are looking at it? How many people have accessed that? What are they saying about it if we allow comments on that? And so you can start to see the impact of the work that you're doing to build your community and not just say, well, yeah, it's a good idea, I should do this. You can actually start to see impact. And then the 5th and final is make it work. And what I mean for that is use it as a tool. What are those things that you can streamline and turn into a one-to-many? Again, it's that information that you're sharing out with all of your customers. Instead of trying to do that on a one-to-one basis, put it in the community. Broaden the reach of it. I've seen that done with benchmarking. I mean, I know for tech companies, benchmarking is huge. I want to see as a customer how I'm doing compared to others like me. How are they using the product? And benchmarking is tricky because, a lot of times what I've seen done is a CSM will come in and run a specific benchmark report for each of their high-touch customers. That takes a lot of time. They're building it out. They're looking at the insights. What you could do instead is pull out persona general benchmarking, post it in the community, and then that way your customers can look at their data, their usage, go to the community and compare it. Now when you have your QBRs or your whatever meetups you have, now you can talk about, okay, so you're under here. Let's talk about what you can do to elevate that usage. Or wait, you're way over here. I'd like you, could you share what you're doing? Because we'd like to share that with others. And so you just bring in that ownership, that ability for your customers to kind of own their learning, to kind of own their growth. And you're doing it in a way that is more effective as your teams probably are smaller.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a lot there. I asked for 5 things. You gave me 5 things, but they were all very dense 5 things. A lot of good stuff there. I think one of the things that I wonder about as people listen to that, they think, okay, wow, I need to have a really good strategy. I got to make sure I've got a plan to have good content there. I've got to have a good way to have this work with the rest of my tech stack. I've got to figure out all these different elements. The thing that comes to my mind now that I'm hearing this, and I'm wondering if my audience is thinking the same thing, which is basically like, am I ready to do this? Like, is my organization ready to do this? And so I'd be curious from your perspective, when is the right time to make a community work? In other words, like, do you have to be at some level of maturity or team size or revenue where it starts to make sense to start thinking about this? Because if you do it too early, then you might not be able to create the value you're talking about. If you do it too late, you might be really struggling to actually get people started. So I'd be curious, what's your take is like, when should you be ready, and what are the things you can do to try to like make sure your organization is prepared to take on a task like building a community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's interesting because I've seen it at all stages. So I've seen community utilized in a startup even before they launched their product. They built a community because they wanted that feedback and that customer insight as they developed the product. And so when they launched, they had a ready-made community. I've also seen, huge enterprise level customers who have come in and, some of the larger ones that everybody, name recognition, everybody would know. They're massive and they're launching a community now for the first time. I think the best answer to that is your company is ready for a community when you're ready to invest in the community. So if you are willing to put money towards hiring somebody, a community manager to run and do the day to day, if you're willing to, invest, there's a lot of good free tech out there or very inexpensive tech, but they have limitations. There are things they cannot do. They're not built to, and that's okay. So if you're looking to do everything all at once, which by the way I would never recommend, don't do it all. Start with your main goal and then build out. But are you going to invest in the tech for it if that's what's needed to reach your goals? And then are you going to continue to support it? Is this going to be part of what the organizational DNA believes in, right? Is community just a pet project for a single person? Or is it something that leadership recognizes the value of and is willing to invest time and understand the impact it can have on what they're doing and driving their initiatives? I think that's the better question. I don't know that there's a stage that you have to be at X stage. Typically, startups don't tend to do it very often. I have seen it and I've seen it work really well. But oftentimes it's when you start to grow out your CS team. When you start to have more than just one CS person handling all CS, when you start to build that out, that means your book of business is expanding, which means your ability to reach each customer and support them and bring them to that level of engagement that's needed for retention. When you start to see those gaps and you start to see the ability to touch each customer directly diminish, I think that for sure is a time where you should start looking at, okay, could a community come in and help?
It's a straightforward answer, and I really like it. I think a lot from my perspective. I'm always trying to. If you ever watch the show on regular occasion, I tend to be the analogy guy who comes up with some silly analogy. But if you're if you tell yourself, what would be really nice, I want to get in shape, and then you go buy a giant weight set, but the truth is you haven't actually made the commitment and done the things necessary to ensure that you actually use the weight set. Well, that's probably going to sit on the shelf, and you're not gonna get into the fitness level that you want. So there has to be a level of intent, not just for you as an individual, but the organization. There has to be readiness from leadership and buy-in and investment for it to work. And unless you're willing to invest in it consistently and regularly and put resource behind it, you're not going to see the results. It's just like buying
Correct.
gym equipment that you just leave doing nothing on the sidelines.
Exactly. I mean, if you were able to do a poll of your listeners, how many people have a treadmill or a stationary bike that is doubling up as a closet? Like
a
it's there.
very cumbersome piece of furniture that rarely gets used.
Exactly. And then eventually ends up on Craigslist. And that's,
Yep.
that's the thing we find, right, in the community world is those who have invested in it have success. And there are some tremendous customer communities out there that support the brand and support the product in just amazing ways, building that engagement, impacting that retention and helping customers feel like they can use your product because, face it, your customers probably have more products than just you. So how do you make it easy for them? And how do you make it to the point where your product is so embedded in your customers' workflows that to disentangle yourself would be much worse than paying the money to renew you each year. You want to, yes, you want your product to be the best product out there, but really what customers end up staying with is the products that meet their needs the most effectively. And so you may have some quirks and features that a bigger company out there doesn't have, but if you have a customer community that empowers them to own their customer journey in a way that isn't possible and isn't done with maybe that bigger customer, then odds are you're going to keep them.
Oh, such good advice. I think for the audience here, hopefully one of the things that's really encouraging is just the fact that most often we started this whole conversation about technology as the silver bullet that everybody thinks is out there that's really not. And this idea of, we still have so much power as individuals, as humans, to make an impact and to build real connection. And that's really encouraging and exciting to think about. I hope we all walk away with this idea of, maybe, humanity has a chance after all to make some awesome things happen. Heather,
Exactly.
as we're wrapping up here, the last questions we always like to ask, because this is SaaS therapy, every good therapy session has a homework assignment that you need. If you could give our listeners one homework assignment, what would it be?
I think it would be to take a look at the companies that you personally engage with and think through why you engage with them. Mm. It's part need, but it's also part connection. And think about how that applies to your customers.
That's great advice. I love it. Heather, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks everybody for listening today. Just don't forget to go out there and keep on working on building out those relationships with your customers in new and inspiring ways so that they can win and we can all win together. So thank you, Heather, and thanks everyone for being here today.
Todd, thank you so much.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.